start the recording. All right, just so everybody is aware, we will be recording today's webinar. If you do not wish to be recorded, feel free to turn off your camera. We do ask that you do keep yourself muted during the presentation, but you are more than welcome to unmute yourself during the question periods. If you do not feel comfortable unmuting yourself and asking the questions, feel free to put in the chat and I can relay those to Victoria. So thank you everybody for coming to today's webinar on getting your packaged goods on the shelf and keeping them there by Victoria Watts. So Victoria is an entrepreneur with 10 plus years experience in the food manufacturing, wholesale and retail sector, having experience with all aspects of running a business and building a brand from ideation to national distribution and everything in between. She holds an LLB from the University of Ottawa and has practiced law in the areas of labor, employment, and human rights. In addition to her role as CEO and president of Pasta Tavola, Victoria is a mentor and coach to many entrepreneurs and is also a business growth advisor with PARO Women's Center for Enterprise. She's passionate about empowering females to become self-sufficient and successful in any areas of their lives and loves talking everything business. And just a side note, if anybody would like a copy of today's recorded webinar or any of the other recorded webinars, please feel free to send me an email at communications@paro.ca and I will be putting that in the chat. It's all yours, Victoria.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm so excited to be here. I know that there's still some people coming in, but very excited to talk about the consumer packaged goods space and selling your packaged good on shelf and keeping them there. So like Kylie said, I'm co-founder of a company called Pasta Tavola, and I'm also a business growth advisor for PARO Center for Women's Enterprise. Kylie, if you wouldn't mind putting my email in the chat too and just keeping it there, but for everyone here, I do have my email here. Please feel free if you have questions after this webinar. I love sharing what I've learned in this space over the 12 years that I've been working in it. So let us begin. So this is a webinar for foodpreneurs who are currently in the consumer packaged goods space. That's the CPG space. You'll often see that. It's for those foodpreneurs who are interested in selling their product to larger retailers or larger independent stores. So you're ready to take your selling to a next level. And what I hope to accomplish today is first, just tell you a little bit about my own entrepreneurial journey. Then I want to talk to you and just jump right into some of the key things that even before you go out and start pitching your product to retailers, you need to have in place. And then after that, once you get your product on shelf, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you're managing your retailer relationship and how you get your second and third and subsequent sales. So my story, I started Pasta Tavola in 2010, and it's with my sister that we began this entrepreneurial journey. I never thought I would be in the food space, never thought I would own a business. But in 2010, and I was at a crossroads. I loved food and I was doing a lot of cooking at the time. I had moved to a small town and was really thinking about what was next. I did always want to start a business. And I thought, well, that's, the next challenge. My sister was also in the same boat. She had been living abroad and then had come back to Canada and had become a chef. And so I pitched the idea of starting a fresh food business with her. And that is how Pasta Tavola, the idea of Pasta Tavola began. So we're Italian, and if anyone knows, food is a big deal. So for us, and so when we had conversations around, the importance of food and the experience of food, we always talked about the pasta table and our experience of being with our nonna and our aunts and our uncles and cooking delicious food around their pasta table or pasta tavola. So that quickly became our inspiration. And in 2010, we decided to experiment with recipes, pasta recipes and sauce recipes in my kitchen. And then we moved to the farmer's market and we started selling and working the farmer's market circuit. By the end of 2010, we had found a retail space and with a small commercial kitchen. And this is where for about 3 years, we actually learned how to be a business. We learned about the food business. We learned about entrepreneurship. By around 2012, word started getting around about our ravioli. And it was really this item that started to take off. We were getting calls from restaurants and some of our local retailers were wanting to sell it in store. So that's how we began. And around 2016, we started to get more busy, right? And so we started to scale. We moved into a bigger facility. We upgraded our machines, refrigeration, and then we started to sell to more cities outside of our local community. Before we knew it, we were across Ontario. We had had 2 renovations to our facility, and we wanted to grow even more. By 2019, we decided we wanted to move nationally into become a national brand. And in the midst of a pandemic, we launched our product nationally. So we signed on with a national distributor. We got a broker, a national broker, and we launched it in November of last year. And so far, we're now sold in all provinces of Canada. So it really was a dream for us to be able to do that. Whenever I do webinars about entrepreneurship, or I speak to any of my clients about the CPG space and how to build their business, the first thing I start with is knowing your value. And what I'm talking about there is your value proposition. And I know you've heard it, and I'm sure if you're working with BGAs, we talk about it all the time, but it really is a foundational part of establishing a business, I think in any business. But when you're pitching and when you're in the food space, you really need to understand the value that your product is going to bring to the market. And it has to be clear. You need to know all facets of your product. You need to know your customer, and you need to know how you distinguish yourself from others in the marketplace. A very clear and strong value proposition is going to be the basis for a good pitch. So let's just get into some of the elements of a good value proposition. So there are 4 elements. Number 1 is what you're going to offer. So it's the product or service that's going to solve the problem for your consumer or add value to the market. Who is your target audience? Who's that ideal customer that you want to purchase your product? Why? Why do you bring value to the market? What are the recognizable benefits that matter most to your target consumer? And how? How are you different from your competitors? What is the reason that that customer is going to choose you over everyone else in your category? When you pitch your retailer, these elements are going to come up again and again. It's not going to be in this order. You're going to develop your own style, but I guarantee that these 4 elements you are going to address. So have it down pat before you even step in the store. I'm going to give you an example of a value proposition. because it's also important and they're really difficult. If you're working on a business canvas model right now, you know that that is the core part of your business canvas model. This is totally me having, made this up, and it's a little absurd, but it gives you, a sample of what the value proposition is, what it would look like. So this is a value proposition for Soda Me Drink Company. Excuse me. Soda Me Drink Company offers the consumer a bubbly, non-alcoholic soda drink that contains no sugar and is produced using fruit foraged from the Amazon jungle. So that's your what. Our ideal customers are individuals who seek out adventure, who care about their health, and want alternatives to the traditional sugary drinks found in grocery aisles. That's the who. Soda Me drinks are refreshing, jam-packed with natural ingredients, and are naturally sweet with less than 20 grams of carbohydrates. That's the why. And unlike your competitors, our drinks do not use artificial sweeteners and are suitable for a keto or diabetic diet. And that's the how. Once you have your value, you know it inside and out. It's almost like a mantra to you. The next thing you have to make sure that you have in hand and is solid is your packaging. And there's a lot to unpack with packaging, but I'm going to focus on the three main purposes of packaging. So, packaging has three purposes in the market. Number one, it's for protection. Number two, it provides your consumers and your retailers with information. And number three, marketing. You have to remember that when you hand over your product to a retailer or the shipping person, you have no control over it. And unfortunately, they may not take care of your product as well as you might. So you always have to be thinking about your packaging from the perspective of the consumer and the retailer and how your product is going to be managed throughout the entire process. From the time you drop it off to the time that your customer takes it home, opens it up and completes it. Number one, does your packaging maintain the integrity of your product during shipping, excessive handling, and storage? Remember, you're going to have other products being put on top of your products. You're going to have multiple people touching your product. You want to make sure that the packaging that you have is going to protect your product from all of those things that could possibly happen in the shipping or placing on shelf or handling by the consumer. You need to understand too, the materials of your packaging. Is your packaging going to withstand the rigors of being in a refrigerator, of being in a freezer, of being under bright lights? The material used to make up your packaging is very important. In fact, the ink, or the labels that you use, all of these things are affected under bright lights or under different storage conditions. So you really need to make sure that you've investigated the type of materials out there and to make sure that it's suitable for your particular item. Will your packaging maintain your shelf life? Packaging plays a very important role in shelf life. It can either extend your shelf life or it could recede your shelf life, take it away. That's another thing that you have to keep in mind when you're looking at the materials that you and the possibilities for your packaging for your product. Lastly, does your packaging prevent harmful chemicals from leaching outside of your packaging into the environment and also from your packaging into your food itself. The bottom line is that you need to ensure that the type of packaging you use in the materials, but also the shape of your packaging, all of those things are actually have a synergy or actually match the type of product that you are putting on shelf and the type of conditions under which your product is going to be stored. So the next purpose of packaging is to provide information. Your packaging provides important information about your product and the safety of your product. And this is going to include things like your nutritional fact table, a clear list of ingredients including your stated allergens and your best before date. These things are legally prescribed. So as you know, if you're investigating the CPG space or the food space in general, there are a number of regulations that oversee or regulate how you manufacture, how you package, and how you label your food. It's very important that you're in compliance with these regulations. Canada has one of the best traceability and safety systems for food in the world. And there are huge consequences for you economically. If there's a recall on your product, if something happens, you've represented something wrong on your product, there's huge financial consequences to you, and there's other penalties involved too. So you really want to make sure that you've investigated and made sure that these are in compliance with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency legislation. The other thing that must be included on your packaging are proper UPC codes, and they must be scannable by your retailers. Now, I'm sure you've all seen buyabarcode.com. Those are UPCs for sure. And if you are just planning to sell to smaller retailers, those might suffice. But the reality is that if you're looking to grow and scale up your company to something larger and start working with larger retailers, you are going to need to get a UPC code from GS1 Canada. And in a nutshell, GS1 is an organization that operates globally to distribute UPCs to all suppliers that are relevant and specific to your company and to your product line. It's really a way of just maintaining coherence in the system and allows for global trade. So that is, so UPC codes, important piece for your retailer. It's also important to have a UPC code because for inventory purposes, UPCs are used by retailers to organize their inventory and to maintain stock. The last purpose for your packaging is marketing. Packaging is, it goes without saying, packaging is an important part of your branding and your marketing strategy. If you have unique and attractive packaging, you'll be able to entice the consumer. That is the whole point. You want your product to jump off the shelf. If you are putting out a really delicious cookie, you know how many cookies there are on the shelf already in that category. What is going to make your cookie stand out from the rest? And that's what your packaging does. Your packaging also is an important communication tool. It can tell the story of your business. So it can tell you things about what values that that business stands for. Are they organic? Do they believe in traceability? Do they have a sustainable product? All of these things can be worked into your packaging to communicate that and to entice your consumer to purchase your product. The third thing we're going to talk about today that you need to have in hand is your marketing collateral. And what I'm talking about are two key pieces of documentation that you have to bring when you are pitching a retailer. One is a price list, and two is a sell sheet. The whole point of having your collateral material there is for you to refer to something when you're talking to your retailer, but also to make the process of listing your product easy. We want to remove any barriers to your retailer to getting your product on shelf. So this is an example of a price list that I made up. And I'm just going to walk through a few of the things that are really important to have. So obviously you need to have your item, your case pack. And your case pack is how many units of your product you have in a box. You need to have the unit size of your product, as well as the case size of your product. You need to communicate to your retailer how they should store your product. They obviously need the UPC code. If you have any certifications, that is also helpful. And very important, you need to have your wholesale price and the suggested retail price. Lastly, your shelf life. You need to indicate to your retailer the shelf life. This is information that they require to input into their system in order to get you on shelf. Sell sheets. Sell sheets are usually a pamphlet or a one-page document front and back. And it really is a key marketing piece, but it also provides the retailer with some key information. And you will use your sell sheets all the time with consumers. If you're at any trade shows, during presentations, you will distribute your sell sheets. And it should have everything about you in a nutshell on those documents. So sell sheets are designed to educate the retailer about your product. It's designed to inspire them to purchase your product, and it's designed to assist them in ordering your product. So I just had an example of Dole here, and I think there's some really interesting things that they've put on the front. So this is obviously the front of their sell sheet, and it's a marketing piece for them. This is your opportunity to make some call outs about your product. What are your brand values? They even have on this sell sheet the importance of this, how much the smoothie bowls are expected to increase, so trends. And then they have some really beautiful pictures of what their smoothies look like. They also have some call outs down here, simple ingredients, pre-cut fruit, yada, yada, it's all there. So this would be the front of a sell sheet. And then on the back, you're going to have some of the more, specifics about your product. You need to have a picture of your product so they know what they're talking about. They're often using these pieces for communication with other people in their store. So you want to make sure that there's a visual of your actual product in the packaging, or individually, however it's packed. You need to have your UPC on there, your nutritional facts table, and your ingredients list. You would have more information about the weight, how many units, the whole bit. And like I said, you may have some additional callouts on the back. Really important to have is the contact information for ordering. These are the sheets that your retailer is going to refer to again and again to contact you and to get more information if necessary. So you've gotten everything in place. You have your value proposition. You're ready to make your pitch. You have your packaging in place. You have your sell sheets in place, and you have your price list. You also need to know ahead of time and be prepared to answer questions, because they're going to happen and you don't want to be figuring it out on the spot. So when you're after your pitch, your retailer is going to want to know, how is your product going to be delivered? Are you delivering it, or is it going to come through a third-party carrier? Your retailer is going to want to know about your lead time. Your lead time is that period of time from the time that they actually place the order to the time that they actually receive the order. It's very important, this lead time, and it totally depends on your process for producing the product. But the key thing is about lead time is you do not want to let your retailer go without any product. So they need to be mindful of how long it's going to take to replenish your product. Is there a minimum order requirement? If you have a product that costs $60, but it costs $100 to deliver, you're going to want to make sure that you have a minimum that they have to order in order for you to make money off of that order. Once again, you want to tell them, they'll want to know how many units per case, and they'll also want to know about the shelf life. They're going to also want to know about mixing your product. Can they mix a product to make up a case? If you are selling multiple SKUs, this will be a question that they'll ask. And it's really up to you how you want to organize your processing. But that is, you need to have an answer to that question too. They will ask you, oftentimes, I get this asked oftentimes, will you provide a free fill, or is there a special on an opening order? And this is really entirely up to you, but you have to remember that there is a cost. A free fill is when you give a product to a retailer. Some retailers ask for free fills and some expect it, but others do not. Ultimately, it's your decision whether you want to give them an opening special or if you want to give away product to get it on shelf. Lastly, do you guarantee your sales? Guarantee sales are when, like, what happens if your product goes off code, which means what if it's expired? Or what if your product doesn't move? They want to know that you stand behind your product and that you will provide them with a credit if either of those scenarios happen. So you've done the work, you've done the pitch, you've gotten your first order. This is an amazing thing to celebrate, and it's a great feeling when you see your product on shelf. The goal, though, is not to get the first sale. There is a lot of work that goes into that, but the real work happens in the second and subsequent sales. So what next? How do we make sure that we can keep our product on shelf and we can get those next sales? I'm just going to go through a few things that I have learned having managed my sales for over 10 years. You want to get as much information from your retailers as possible when you're standing in front of them. So the first thing you want to get from them is you want to know who to contact and to check in on your product. So who is it that you're contacting to place an order? And who do I check in with just to make sure that things are going well? You want to know how your contact person, and it's often the store manager or the grocery buyer, you want to know how they prefer to be contacted. You also want to know what days they're unavailable or what days you should contact them on. The key to managing your product on shelf is to touch base with your retailer often. Drop-ins are always the best, but it may not be feasible, especially in a pandemic. But telephone works and even email. Sometimes retailers will even text me. But the key thing here is consistency. You want to place your retailer on a regular call cycle or drop-in cycle. I managed my sales for over 10 years simply by picking up the phone and calling them every 2 to 3 weeks. It was predictable. I trained them to know that I was going to be the person who was contacting them and when it was going to happen. So they were ready for the order, and I was ready to take the order when they needed it. You also want to be accessible if there are any problems. So a lot of my retailers have my personal number, because if there are problems, I want to know about it. Another way that you can keep and promote your product on shelf is to do product tastings. Difficult right now in a pandemic, most of them are suspended, but it is a great way to show your retailer that you back up your product, you stand behind it, that you're going to give them support to move your product. And it's also a great way to share your product with consumers. Ultimately, what you want to do in order to get that next sale is to cultivate an open and trusting relationship. Your retailers want you to succeed. And if they like you and they know you're going to back up your product and be there with any problems and service them well, they will want to help you out. They will work with you to move your product in store. So that's it in a nutshell. I have given you just the basic kind of fundamental things that I believe are key to selling your product to retailers. There's a lot to learn in this space. There's a lot more details that I can share with you. But I hope that you've walked away with some sense of the basic building blocks for going out and selling your product and for keeping them on shelf. So I have left, just before I noticed that there's some questions here, but please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm going to just leave my my email here, and I would love to chat about your business and share information. Are there any questions?
We got a quiet group today.
Okay.
If anyone has any questions, they can either, again, unmute themselves and ask away, or feel free to put it in the chat.
I have one question.
Sure.
What programs did you find best for using for your ingredient labels?
This is a really good question, Dan. We did the whole, I'm going to tell you really, like, this is the way I would approach it. I can give you, we did actually purchase, there's a ton on the market, and we bumbled along with that, doing our own nutritional fact tables. But one of the problems that I found with the ones that we purchased was that they never kept up with the regulations. And I know recently they just went through new, regulations around nutritional fact labels. And I know that it's ongoing. My recommendation for doing nutritional fact labels is to actually get, and your ingredients list, is to actually go with a third party person who actually specializes in it. Like I said, I have a legal background, and this whole area of nutritional fact labels and ingredients is highly regulated. And I find it really, like, it's just so dense and difficult to comprehend. And it's so specific to the type of product that you're working in, that you're working with, that it just was not worth it for us to continue putting out packaging that we couldn't rely on, like nutritional facts labels that we couldn't rely on and that were incorrect, especially as we started to grow and we weren't under the radar, right? So it is a bit of an investment, but it's not like it's tens of thousands of dollars to do it. I do have some names of a few places that that does do it, and you can check it out on the website, on Google too. But there are a number of places that do the nutritional fact label and your ingredients list. And I felt really happy about being able to, and comfortable about being able to transfer that liability to them.
For sure. That definitely helps for sure. So go with a third party company for the labels. And did you find that, like, if your recipe was kind of the same, but like say you use, like, mine is hot sauce, so my recipe would be the same, but I'm just changing like peppers, would that require different nutritional fact tables, do you think?
Yeah, it definitely would, because the nutrition and the different, if you're adding different spices or you're adding different peppers, the nutritional information would be different. These are also questions you can ask the person, just ask them, when you talk with them about it, and say, like, this is the situation. We have the same issue as you. Like, we have a line of tomato sauces, and the base of them, obviously the tomatoes that we use are the same, right? But
Yeah.
some of the spices and some of the formulation isn't exactly the same, but the base of it, we still use, certain amount of the tomatoes. But when you're doing the nutritional facts, it's not just about like the ingredients, but it's also the proportion, right, of the ingredients.
Okay, for sure.
So I really do stress, I get asked so many times, like all the time, about the nutritional facts. And it's so, when you're starting a business, you always tend to go, you want to do the cheapest thing, right? And it's a lot of work, labor comes on you to do it. But there's just certain things that I think that is worth the investment. And this is one of those areas, is the nutritional facts and the ingredients.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Any other questions, or? No, I think that's it. Well, thank you very much, Victoria, for your awesome presentation. Actually, I learned a lot today.
Great.
And thank you so much for everybody for coming. Again, if you have any other questions for Victoria, you can feel free to email her at businessgrowth14@paro.ca. I have put it in the chat. And again, if you would like a copy of today's webinar recording, please feel free to email me at communications@paro.ca. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.